Billionaire orders Waitress to lick his shoes after she spills his drink. What happens next? What if one embarrassing mistake at a five-star restaurant could spark a movement? What if the words, "clean it with your tongue," weren't the end of the story, but the beginning of a journey that would change everything? The Luxe Bistro glowed under the soft amber light of its crystal chandeliers, a beacon of wealth and exclusivity in the heart of Los Angeles. It was a place where the city's elite gathered, CEOs, celebrities, and tech moguls who tossed around million-dollar deals as casually as they ordered their $200 bottles of wine. The air buzzed with the clink of glasses, the murmur of self-important conversations, and the faint hum of entitlement that clung to every polished surface. Sophia Johnson, a 26-year-old waitress, moved through this world like a ghost. Her black uniform blended into the shadows, her warm brown skin and sharp, intelligent eyes often overlooked by the patrons she served. At 5 feet 10 inches, she carried herself with a quiet grace, her movements precise and practiced. To the diners, she was just another server, invisible unless something went wrong. But Sophia was more than that. She was a dreamer, a fighter, a woman who refused to let the world define her by the tray in her hands. Raised in South Los Angeles, Sophia had grown up watching her mother, Clarissa, work 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Clarissa's hands were calloused, her back perpetually stooped from years of cleaning houses and waiting tables, but her spirit was unbreakable. "The world will try to make you small, Sophia," she'd say, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "Don't let them. You're meant for more." Those words were Sophia's anchor, guiding her through a childhood of second-hand clothes, dismissive teachers, and the constant hum of systemic prejudice that told her she'd never be enough. By day, Sophia was a full-time student, pursuing a degree in social work at Cal State, LA. By night, she worked at the Luxe Bistro, saving every penny for her dream, a non-profit that would empower marginalized communities, giving them the tools to rise above the barriers she'd faced her whole life. She was close, so close, to finishing her degree, to turning her vision into reality. But the path wasn't easy. The microaggressions she faced daily, patrons who assumed she was uneducated, managers who scrutinized her every move, customers who snapped their fingers like she was a dog, wore her down. Yet she pressed on, her mother's words echoing in her mind. Tonight, though, was different. Tonight, the air in the Luxe Bistro felt heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. The restaurant was packed, every table occupied by power players in tailored suits and designer dresses. At the center of it all sat Richard Carmichael, a 50-year-old tech billionaire whose name was synonymous with ruthless ambition. His AI company, Neural Core, had revolutionized industries and made him one of the richest men in the world. With his silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that never quite reached them, Richard commanded attention. He was flanked by his usual entourage, business associates who laughed too loudly at his jokes and nodded at his every word. Sophia had served Richard before. He was the kind of man who didn't look at waitstaff, who spoke over them, who left tips that were insults rather than gratitude. She'd learned to keep her distance, to move quickly and quietly around him. But tonight, as she approached his table to refill his wine glass, her hands betrayed her. The bottle slipped, just a fraction, but it was enough. The glass tipped, and a cascade of red wine spilled across Richard's pristine white shirt, staining it like blood on snow. The room froze. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Waiters paused with trays in hand. Every eye turned to Sophia, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure they could hear it. She felt the weight of their stares, the silent judgment of a room full of people who saw her as nothing more than a mistake. I am so sorry, sir," she stammered, grabbing a napkin and dabbing at the stain, her hands shaking. "Let me get some club soda." Richard's face twisted into a mask of rage. He shot to his feet, towering over her. "You incompetent fool," he roared, his voice echoing through the dining room. "Do you have any idea how much this shirt costs? More than you make in a month, I bet." Sophia's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Please, let me help fix it." "Fix it?" Richard sneered, stepping closer. His cologne, sharp and expensive, filled her senses. You think club soda will fix this mess? His eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped to a venomous hiss. Clean it up with your tongue. The words hit like a slap. The room went dead silent, the kind of silence that suffocates. Sophia felt every pair of eyes on her. Patrons, servers, the manager hovering nearby, too cowardly to intervene. Her knees trembled, and for a moment, she felt small, insignificant, like the disposable thing Richard thought she was. But then, her mother's voice cut through the haze. The world will try to make you small, Sophia. Don't let them. She straightened, her spine stiffening. She didn't respond to Richard's taunt. She didn't apologize again. Instead, she set the napkin down, turned on her heel, and walked away, her head held high. The room remained silent, but she could feel the shift. Some watched in shock, others in admiration. Richard's face burned red, his fists clenched, but she didn't look back. Sophia finished her shift in a daze, the weight of Richard's words lingering like a bruise. She clocked out, changed into her street clothes, and stepped into the cool Los Angeles night. The city hummed around her, car horns, distant music, the pulse of a place that never slept, but inside, she was a storm. Anger, humiliation, and something else, resolve, churned in her chest. She couldn't let this go. Not this time. Richard's words weren't just about her, they were about every person who'd ever been made to feel less than human because of their job, their skin, their circumstances. She thought of her mother, who'd endured years of disrespect to give Sophia a chance. She thought of her classmates, scraping by while chasing dreams the world told them were out of reach. She thought of every server who'd bitten their tongue to keep their job. The next morning, Sophia made a decision. She reached out to Maya Torres, a journalist known for exposing workplace abuse and systemic inequality. Over coffee in a small South LA cafe, Sophia poured out her story. She described the incident, the humiliation, the way Richard's words had stripped her bare in front of a room full of strangers. Maya listened, her eyes narrowing with every detail. This isn't just about you, Maya said, her pen tapping against her notebook. This is about power, about how people like Richard Carmichael think they can treat anyone however they want. Let me write this. Sophia hesitated. Going public meant exposing herself to scrutiny, to judgment, to the risk of losing her job. But then she thought of her nonprofit, the Rising Voice Project, and the people it was meant to serve. If she stayed silent, she'd be letting Richard win. She'd be letting the world make her small. Do it, Sophia said, her voice firm. Maya's article hit the internet like a spark in dry grass. Titled, "Billionaire's Cruel Demand, A Waitress's Fight for Dignity," it detailed the incident at the Lux Bistro with unflinching clarity. It painted Sophia not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to be broken. Within hours, the story was everywhere, shared on X, picked up by major news outlets, debated on morning talk shows. The hashtag enough is enough began trending, with thousands sharing their own stories of workplace humiliation, racism, and classism. Sophia's phone buzzed non-stop, messages of support, interview requests, even threats from Richard's loyalists. She ignored the noise and focused on the voices that mattered. The single mother who'd been fired for standing up to a rude customer, the black teenager who'd been passed over for promotions because of his appearance, the immigrant worker who'd been told to go back to where you came from. Their stories fueled her, reminding her why she was doing this. The Lux Bistro issued a statement distancing itself from the incident, claiming it was reviewing its policies. Sophia wasn't surprised when her manager called to suggest she take some time off. She knew what that meant. They were protecting their brand, not her. But she didn't need the Lux Bistro anymore. The world was watching, and her voice was growing louder. 2 weeks later, Sophia stood on a stage at a workers' rights rally in downtown LA. The crowd was a sea of faces, black, brown, white, young, old, all united by a shared sense of injustice. Her hands trembled as she gripped the microphone, but her voice was steady. "I'm not here to tell you about one bad night," she said, her words carrying over the crowd. "I'm here to tell you about a world that tells people like me we don't matter. That we're invisible. That we're disposable. But we're not. Every one of us has a voice, and it's time we use it." The crowd erupted, their cheers echoing through the streets. Sophia's nonprofit, the Rising Voice Project, saw a flood of donations, small contributions from everyday people, larger ones from organizations inspired by her story. She hired a small team, rented a modest office in South LA, and began planning programs to support marginalized communities, mentorship for young people, job training for low-income workers, advocacy for workplace protections. But the fight wasn't over. Richard Carmichael remained untouched, his company issuing a vague apology that blamed a misunderstanding and avoided mentioning Sophia by name. He continued his life as if nothing had happened, dining at exclusive restaurants, attending high-profile events, untouchable in his world of wealth and power. Until he wasn't. Months later, Sophia was invited to speak at a charity gala in Beverly Hills, where the Rising Voice Project was being honored for its impact. The room was filled with philanthropists, activists, and a few familiar faces from the Lux Bistro's clientele. Sophia delivered her speech with the same fire she'd always carried, sharing her vision for a world where no one was made to feel small. The applause was deafening. As she stepped off the stage, she saw him, Richard Carmichael, standing awkwardly near the back of the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment, she felt the same surge of anger from that night. But she was no longer the trembling waitress in a black uniform. She was Sophia Johnson, a leader, a voice for the voiceless. Richard approached her, his usual confidence replaced by something softer, almost uncertain. "Sophia," he said, his voice low. "I owe you an apology. What I said that night was unforgivable. I've been following your work, and I respect what you're doing." Sophia studied him, her expression unreadable. She didn't need his apology. She'd built something bigger than his cruelty, something that no amount of wealth could diminish. But there was power in this moment, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. "You didn't break me, Richard," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. "But your words hurt more than just me. They're part of a system that keeps people down. If you're truly sorry, prove it. Not with words. With action." Richard nodded, his face a mix of shame and determination. "I want to help," he said. "I'd like to donate to your nonprofit. A significant amount." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Money's easy for you," she said. "If you want to make a difference, do more. Mentor young entrepreneurs from communities like mine. Show up. Learn. Be part of the change, not just the check." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response. Richard hesitated, then extended his hand. "Deal," he said. Over the next year, Sophia's nonprofit grew into a movement. The Rising Voice Project opened community centers in underserved neighborhoods, offering workshops, scholarships, and advocacy. Sophia became a sought-after speaker, her story inspiring millions to demand respect and dignity in their workplaces and lives. Richard, true to his word, didn't just donate. He committed to mentoring young entrepreneurs, spending hours in South LA, listening to their stories, learning about the challenges they faced. It wasn't easy, his privilege often blinded him, and he stumbled more than once. But he kept showing up, slowly earning the trust of those he worked with. His journey of redemption was far from complete, but it was a start. Sophia never forgot that night at the Lux Bistro. It was a scar, a reminder of how the world could try to break you. But it was also a spark, the moment that ignited her purpose. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a leader, a warrior, a voice for those who'd been silenced too long. As she stood in her office one evening, looking out over the city she loved, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. It was a simple text, but it brought tears to her eyes. "You did it, Sophia. You didn't let them make you small.